Hi all, and welcome back to another episode of Disney Canuck. Today I'm going to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of California theme park reopening guidelines. Today, California released theme park reopening guidelines. It's a 20-page document, and I thought I'd go over some of the highlights with you. Just as a warning, this is a summary of what those rules are and are subject, of course, to my interpretation. If you want to see the full set of guidelines, then I'm going to put a link below so that you can read them for yourself, and you should always refer to them for the specifics about reopening. With that said, let's get started. First and foremost, the rules have been divided between smaller theme parks and larger theme parks. Smaller theme parks are defined as those that have a park capacity of 15,000 or less. So clearly this doesn't apply to Disneyland or Disney's California Adventure. But the basic rules for smaller theme parks are that visitors must reside in the same county as that theme park, and they can open in the orange tier. Whereas larger theme parks do not have a residency requirement, and they have to wait till the yellow tier in order to be able to open. This will essentially mean that Disneyland has a few weeks to go at the earliest before they're able to reopen. So I'm going to take a look at a blog post that I wrote where I summarized everything. I'll put a link to that below as well, just in case you want to read it. But let's take a look at some of the big highlights. So we've already talked a little bit about the park capacity. Park capacity is going to be at 25%, and that includes rules for all indoor drinking and dining establishments. Obviously, face masks are going to be required, and there's a whole series of rules around face masks, and I'm going to talk about them as we go through the video because they'll apply in different sections. Employees, so cast members, are going to require COVID-19 training. That training is prescribed and includes things like recognizing symptoms and what you should do if you have symptoms and when it's safe to return to work. And that'll have to occur before the theme parks reopen. The next one is a bit of a biggie, and that's that theme parks should have a reservation system in effect for visitors to the parks. So this is very similar to the ones that are in place at Disney World as well as other Disney theme parks around the world. But there is one very big difference. And that is Disney is going to have to contact guests 24 hours prior to their visit and do a screening for COVID-19 symptoms. If a guest states that they have COVID-19 or that they are exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, they must be told that they will be denied entry into the park and not to come to Disneyland for their scheduled reservation. Once they arrive on their day of reservation, they will also need to be temperature and or symptom screened before being allowed admission into the park. This is going to probably be very similar to the temperature screenings that are in effect at Walt Disney World as well as other Disney theme parks. Cleaning protocols. Now there are a lot of rules around cleaning, but they can basically be boiled down to all surfaces must be routinely cleaned and disinfected using approved cleaning supplies. And then there's some additional rules around performances as well as ride vehicles, which we'll get into when we start talking about performances and attractions. There's going to be no indoor queuing permitted for attractions. So this is going to be a little different than other Disney theme parks, which allows that. At Disneyland and all California theme parks, queuing must occur outside, and there must be impermeable barriers for things like switchbacks in the queue. Now, when you get on the ride, you have to have a face mask on at all times. And if there's any risk to it coming off, or there's any safety risks associated with wearing a face mask, then that attraction must remain closed. With the ride vehicles themselves, all of the members of an individual party can be seated together, and after that, separate parties must be socially distanced from each other. This is in essence going to mean there will be no single rider line where you can buddy up with someone that is also a single rider. They will have to all be socially distant as well. Now, there's also strict cleaning required for ride vehicles, and this is another one that's kind of interesting. That is, if the gate is manually operated, a ride attendant must wash their hands after touching the gate. And ride attendants aren't allowed to help guests in and out of vehicles and things like that. That must be done by another member of their party riding on the attraction. And then the control panels that run the attractions must also be regularly cleaned and disinfected. The last thing I want to talk about are performances. So any of the shows that go on inside a theme park, including character greetings, have very specific rules. So for shows, there has to be a limited number of performances each day to allow for cleaning in between each performance. Now, when I talk about cleaning, this includes things like microphones that are used and props used during the performance. So it's not just kind of the theater to make sure that there's no garbage laying around or anything like that. The theater must be cleaned between performances, including the gear that the performers are using. Seating has to remain socially distant so that parties can be sat together, but each party must be socially distanced from another party so that we maintain that physical distance away from each other for COVID-19 purposes. And then when it comes to things like costumes and uniforms and things like that, there's also very strict rules. So costumes must only be handled by a costuming or wardrobe department and the person wearing that costume. And so for things like that, they will need to be specific to an individual cast member, and they have to be in a plastic bag so that no other cast member can use them. And the same is going to be true for uniforms. They don't really want sharing of uniforms and things like that. So there's going to be all new sets of rules that places like Disneyland are going to need to follow with respect to costuming. The last little note to all of this is that public health inspectors will be going through theme parks to make sure that they are complying with the rules. So this is going to include things like routine inspections. And so the expectation is that theme parks are going to have a lot of signage around, as well as staff members enforcing the rules in order for the theme parks to open by following all of the guidelines in the document. And for guests that are refusing to follow those guidelines, they must be removed from the facility. Or in other words, they're told to leave the park, and we must make sure that they leave the park. So all in all, the rules are a lot of what we expected to see in them, with a few surprises such as the calling guests with the reservations to make sure that they're screened for symptoms before they arrive. But everything else was pretty well as expected. So tell me, what do you think of the guidelines in the comments below? And let's get the discussion going as to when we expect Disneyland to open and whether we think the rules strike the balance that the governor was hoping for and are going to be something that Disney's going to be able to do. As always, if you enjoy Disney content and you like watching my videos, please subscribe and click the notification bell to receive updates whenever I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you real soon.